Before we begin, here's a question to sit with. Have you ever watched a person who had built an entire world around the management of everything? Every variable accounted for, every outcome anticipated, every situation arranged to produce the desired result. Encounter the one thing that could not be managed? Drop your answer in the comments as you listen. Jade Whitmore had accounted for everything. The legal structure, the timeline, the financial arrangement that would benefit both parties. Her company would secure the partnership it needed for the Singapore expansion, and the man in front of her would receive enough to clear his debt, stabilize his business, and fund his daughter's education for the next 12 years. She had presented it the way she presented every proposal. Clearly, specifically, with the numbers organized to make the decision obvious. She had not accounted for the child. Not because she had forgotten there was a child. The due diligence had included everything, including the fact that Daniel Park was a 38-year-old widower raising a 7-year-old daughter alone. She knew about the child. She had simply not expected the child to be in the room. And she had not expected the child to look at her the way children look at things they are trying to understand, with the specific, unhurried attention of someone who has not yet learned that certain questions are not supposed to be asked. The child's name was Lily. She was 7 years old, and in the space of one afternoon, she asked Jade Whitmore 3 questions that no one in Jade's professional life had asked her in years. The first question made Jade pause. The second question made something shift. The third question changed everything. There is a specific kind of intelligence that children have and adults spend considerable energy forgetting. Not academic intelligence. Not the kind that produces results on tests or impresses teachers or gets sorted into categories. The kind that sees. The kind that looks at a person and asks the question that the person has arranged their entire life to avoid being asked. Not with cruelty, not with strategy, just with the specific, unhurried directness of someone who has not yet learned that some doors are not supposed to be knocked on. This is a story about a woman who built an empire and forgot to build a life. And about a 7-year-old who knocked on every door. If you have ever been seen, really seen, without warning, by someone you did not expect, this story is yours. Before we begin, one ask. If this story finds something true in you today, write Lily changed the plan in the comments. Let this family know you are here. Now, let us begin. Jade Whitmore was 42 years old and had spent the past 16 years building Whitmore Global into a technology and infrastructure consulting firm with operations in 9 countries and annual revenues that placed her in a category of professional achievement that most people only read about. She had grown up in Chicago, the daughter of a postal worker father and a school administrator mother who had given her. Through a childhood organized around the specific discipline of people who understood that excellence was not optional for Black girls who wanted to arrive somewhere. An early and thorough education in what it cost to be exceptional and why the cost was worth paying. She had paid the cost. Full cost, no discounts. A full scholarship to Northwestern. A master's in business from Columbia. 6 years at a global consulting firm where she had arrived knowing more than most of her peers and had proven it quietly and consistently until quietly and consistently was no longer adequate to describe what she was doing. She had founded Whitmore Global at 30 with a business partner who had been out by year 3 and a vision that had proven, in retrospect, to be approximately a decade ahead of the market. She was brilliant. She was also, in the specific way of people who have given everything to one thing for 16 years, almost entirely alone. Not unhappy in any dramatic sense. Not performing contentment. She was genuinely satisfied by her work in the specific, clean way of someone who found the construction of complex business solutions as naturally engaging as breathing. But there was a shape to her life that she had stopped looking at directly. The specific shape of someone whose professional world was full and expanding and whose personal world was a very quiet apartment in a very nice building where she arrived late and left early and where the only living thing was a plant she was killing slowly through insufficient attention. She had tried relationships, 3 serious ones across the past decade. Each had ended in the same general way. Not dramatically, not through betrayal or failure, but through the specific, quiet attrition of someone who was never fully there. She had told herself each time that the timing was wrong. She had recently begun to suspect that it was not the timing. The Singapore partnership was the most significant deal of Whitmore Global's history. Meridian Asia, a Singapore-based infrastructure consortium with contracts across 6 Southeast Asian markets, had been in acquisition conversations with 3 firms over the past 8 months. Whitmore Global was the strongest operational candidate. The technology platform Jade had built was, by any objective assessment, the most sophisticated of the 3. What Meridian Asia was looking for was not just operational capability. They were looking for stability, for the specific, long-term institutional character of a firm that would be there in 10 years exactly the way it was today, built on something more durable than individual talent. The principal of Meridian Asia, a man named William Chung who had built his consortium over 30 years through the specific, patient relationship building of someone who understood that infrastructure was a long game, had said something in their 3rd meeting that Jade had carried with her. He had said, "We invest in organizations that have roots, not just branches. Branches impress us. Roots give us confidence." She had understood what he was saying. She had also understood, for the first time, that the specific shape of her life, the quiet apartment, the dying plant, the 3 relationships ended through absence, was visible to the kind of person who looked for roots. The solution she had arrived at was efficient and practical. An arranged marriage. Temporary. Structured as a contractual agreement with full legal documentation and a predetermined term. She had done the research. Daniel Park. Daniel Park was 38 years old. He had grown up in Atlanta, the son of Korean-American parents who had owned a small hardware and home goods store in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood for 30 years and who had given him, through a childhood spent in the back rooms and stockrooms of that store, a specific and thorough education in what it meant to build something that served a community and in what it cost when the community changed around you faster than the business could adapt. He had a degree in architecture from Georgia Tech and had spent 8 years at an urban planning firm before leaving to start his own small practice focused on community-centered design in underserved Atlanta neighborhoods. The kind of work that was genuinely meaningful and structurally difficult to fund, where the clients who most needed good design were the least able to pay for it, and where the gap between what Daniel believed architecture should be and what the market rewarded for it was a constant, low-grade financial pressure. His wife, Sue Jean, had died of a sudden cardiac event 3 years ago. She had been 34 years old. She had been the person who held the equilibrium of their household. Not because Daniel could not hold it, but because she had held it with a specific warmth and grace that, when it was gone, left a gap in the daily architecture of their lives that Daniel had spent 3 years rebuilding around as best he could. Lily had been 4 years old when her mother died. She did not remember enough of Sue Jean to grieve her in the way adults grieve. She remembered the warmth of her, the specific, impressionistic warmth of a very early childhood memory, and had built, in the 3 years since, a relationship with her father that was the most honest and complete relationship either of them had. She was 7 now. She was exceptionally perceptive. She asked questions that made adults go quiet. She had her mother's eyes and her father's way of looking at things, the architect's way, which meant she noticed structure before surface and always wanted to understand how things were held together. Daniel had received Jade's proposal on a Tuesday morning. He had read it 3 times. He had sat with it for 48 hours. He had not wanted to consider it. He had considered it because the financial pressure had reached the specific, quiet crisis point where the decisions he was making about his practice were beginning to affect his ability to make decisions about his daughter's life. He had called Jade's office. He had agreed to a meeting. He had not planned to bring Lily. Lily had plans of her own. The meeting had been arranged for a Saturday morning because Daniel had not wanted to ask his neighbor to take Lily again. She had taken her 3 times in the past 2 weeks for work meetings, and Daniel had a specific, private line he tried not to cross with the favors he asked of people. He had brought Lily with the intention of having her sit in the waiting area with her book and her headphones for the 45 minutes the meeting was expected to take. Lily had a different approach to waiting areas. She had followed him into the meeting room. Jade had been standing at the glass wall of her office looking out at the Atlanta skyline when they came in. She had turned at the sound of the door and had seen Daniel Park, whom she had researched thoroughly, whose professional history and financial position and personal circumstances she knew in the specific, organized way of someone who had done their due diligence. And then, In the space behind him, a small girl in a yellow dress with two neat braids and her father's architectural eyes looking at Jade's office with the specific, interested attention of someone who had just entered an interesting space and was cataloging it. Jade had looked at the child. The child had looked back at her. Then the child had looked at the office, at the awards on the wall, the organizational chart behind the desk, the single plant in the window that was not doing well. Then the child had looked back at Jade. She had said, with the direct, conversational certainty of a 7-year-old who had not yet learned that this was not the kind of thing you said to a stranger, "Your plant is sad." Jade had looked at the plant. It was objectively sad. She had said, "I know. I am not very good at plants." The child had considered this. She had said, "My dad is good at plants. We have 14. Daniel had said, quickly, with the expression of a parent managing a situation. Lily had said, "What?" "It is true." Jade had looked at the child for a moment. Then she had looked at Daniel. She had said, "It is fine." She had said it with the automatic professionalism of someone managing a situation, but something in the child's direct, comfortable presence had already done something to the specific register of the room. Meetings in Jade's office did not begin with conversations about sad plants. They began with agendas. She had no agenda for the plant conversation. She had moved the meeting forward. The proposal was the proposal. She had presented it clearly and specifically. The legal structure, the timeline, the financial arrangement, the public profile requirements, the predetermined term of 18 months. Daniel had listened with the expression of a man who had read the document twice and knew what was in it, and was sitting with the question of what kind of person agreed to something like this. Lily had been sitting in the chair beside her father with her book open, but her eyes mostly on Jade. She had been listening. 7-year-olds listen more carefully than most adults account for. Jade was halfway through the explanation of the public profile requirements when Lily said, not rudely, not loudly, just in the conversational register of a child asking the kind of question that occurs to her. "Why do you want to be married if you do not love my dad?" The room went quiet. Daniel had said, "Lily." Jade had held up a hand. Not dismissively. Something else. She had looked at the child. Lily was looking at her with the specific, unhurried attention of someone who had asked a genuine question and was waiting for a genuine answer. Jade had said, "It is a business arrangement. Do you know what that means?" Lily had thought about it. She had said, "Like when my dad makes a contract for a building. But nobody lives in it to love it." Jade had been quiet for a moment. She had said, "Yes." Something like that. Lily had considered this. Then she had picked up her book. Midpoint question for you. Have you ever had a child say something so simple and so true that it found the exact thing you had been arranging your life to avoid hearing? Lily had been quiet for approximately 12 minutes. This was the longest Lily had been quiet since she was 3 years old, and it communicated, to anyone who knew her, that she was thinking about something specific. She had been looking at Jade. Not obviously. The way children look at things they are studying, peripherally, in short bursts, building a picture from pieces. The meeting had continued. Daniel and Jade had been discussing the timeline and the operational logistics, and Daniel had been asking, in the careful way of someone who was taking something seriously while not yet being certain they were going to agree to it, about the specific arrangement of their daily lives during the 18 months. Then Lily had looked up from her book. She had said, in the same direct, conversational tone she used for everything, "Are you lonely?" Jade had looked at her. Daniel had made the expression of a father who was sincerely considering confiscating the book. Lily had said, "You have a very big office and it is very organized and you have lots of awards, but there is only one plant and it is sad and there are no pictures of anyone." She said it without accusation. With the specific, observational neutrality of a child describing what she sees. Jade had looked at the wall. There were 3 industry awards, 1 frame magazine cover, and a large organizational chart. No photographs. She had not thought about the absence of photographs in a long time. She said, "I keep my personal life separate from my office." Lily had thought about this. She had said, "My dad keeps a picture of me on his desk at work, and a picture of my mom. He says they make the room feel like him." Jade had said nothing. Daniel had said, quietly, "Lily, that is enough." But Lily had already returned to her book. She had not been unkind. She had been accurate, and accurate, in Jade's specific experience, was considerably more affecting than unkind. They had taken a break at some point. Daniel had asked if there was water, and Jade's assistant had brought water, and Daniel had taken Lily to the bathroom, and Jade had stood at the window of her office looking at the Atlanta skyline and the plant. She had looked at the plant for a long time. She had been thinking, not about the proposal and not about Singapore and not about the organizational question of whether an arranged marriage was a reasonable solution to a capital structure problem. She had been thinking about the picture. The picture she did not have on her desk. Not because she had no one to put in it. She had her parents in Chicago, a sister in Houston, 3 close friends from her Columbia years whom she had dinner with twice a year. She did not have a picture because she had not thought to put one up. Because the office was for the work. Because the work was what she had organized everything around for 16 years. Because the work had been enough. She had been standing at the window thinking about whether the work had been enough when the bathroom break ended and Daniel and Lily came back. Lily had walked back to her chair. She had looked at Jade at the window. She had said, without preamble, in the direct tone that was apparently simply her register for all things, "Do you have anyone to call when something good happens?" Jade had turned from the window. Lily had said, "My dad calls me from his office sometimes when something good happens, even if it is a small thing. He calls me and tells me, and I tell him about my thing. We do that." She said it with the warm, factual certainty of a child describing something that is simply true about her life. Jade had looked at the child. She had said, "What did he call about most recently?" Lily had thought about it. She had said, "He found a really good parking spot near my school. He was very happy about it." She said it with complete seriousness. Jade had looked at Daniel. He had the expression of a man who was simultaneously embarrassed and entirely himself. He had said, "It was a very good parking spot." Something happened to Jade's expression that she was not managing. Not a full smile. The beginning of one. The beginning of one that had arrived without being arranged. She turned back to the window. She was looking at a city she had built a significant portion of her professional life in and thinking about the question, "Do you have anyone to call when something good happens?" and discovering, in the sitting with it, that the answer was more complicated than it should have been. The meeting had been running for an hour and 40 minutes. This was considerably longer than 45 minutes. Jade had offered to have lunch brought up. Daniel had accepted. Lily had asked if there were any options without mushrooms. There were. They had eaten in the conference area of Jade's office, the 3 of them, which was not the configuration of any meeting Jade had conducted in the past decade. And Lily had told Jade about the architecture project she had made at school, which involved designing a house for a family with 3 dogs and a grandmother and a garden, and Jade had listened with the specific, focused attention she usually reserved for the operational analysis of a new market. She had found the house design genuinely interesting. This had surprised her. She had asked Lily specific questions about the design. The grandmother's proximity to the kitchen, the garden's orientation relative to the afternoon sun, the dog accommodations. Lily had answered each one with the specific, considered care of someone who had thought about these things. Daniel had been watching this. He had been watching Jade Whitmore, the most efficient person he had ever met, the woman who had opened their meeting with a legal document and a financial proposal, the woman whose office had one sad plant and no photographs. Ask his 7-year-old daughter careful questions about a school architecture project as if the answers mattered. They did matter to him. He was surprised to see them matter to her. Lily had been quiet for a while after lunch. Then she had looked at Jade with the specific expression of a child who has been building towards something for the past 2 hours. She had said, "Why are you making my dad marry you instead of finding someone who loves you?" Daniel had made a sound that was not quite a word. Jade had been quiet. Lily had said, "I am not trying to be mean. I just..." Her expression was the expression of a 7-year-old attempting to articulate something that was slightly beyond her vocabulary, but within her understanding. "I just think it would be better. For everyone. If you found someone who loved you instead." She said it with complete, guileless sincerity. Not as an accusation. As a genuine alternative proposal from someone who was looking at the situation and seeing an obvious problem with the current solution. Jade had looked at the child for a long time. She had said, "It is more complicated than that." Lily had thought about this. She had said, "Is it because you are scared?" The room was very quiet. Daniel had said, "Lily." Lily had said, "My dad was scared after my mom died. He did not want to need anyone, because needing someone means you can lose them. He told me that." "Is that what it is for you?" Jade had not answered immediately. She had looked at this 7-year-old child who had walked into her very organized, very efficient, very carefully constructed office and had asked, in the space of one afternoon, the 3 questions that no one in her professional life had asked her in years. Are you lonely? Do you have anyone to call when something good happens? Is it because you are scared? She had said, how old are you? Lily had said, 7. Almost 8. My birthday is in March. Jade had said, you are very perceptive for someone who is almost 8. Lily had said, my dad says it is my superpower. He says I see things clearly because I have not learned yet to look away from them. Jade had looked at Daniel. He was looking at his daughter with the specific, luminous expression of a father watching the person he loves most say the truest thing in the room. The meeting ended without an agreement, not with a refusal. Daniel had said he needed more time. Jade had said she understood. She had meant it in a way she had not expected to mean it when she said things like that. Lily had put on her jacket, the yellow one, the same yellow as the dress, which Jade had noticed was her favorite color, and had come to stand in front of Jade in the specific, direct way she had been standing in front of things she wanted to get a good look at all afternoon. She had said, your plant needs more water. And maybe a different spot. By the window is too hot in the afternoon. Jade had looked at the plant. She had said, I will move it. Lily had nodded with the specific satisfied expression of someone whose advice has been received. Then she had said, with the conversational ease of someone making a perfectly reasonable observation, I hope you find someone who loves you. Not for business. Just for you. She said it the way she said everything. Without drama, without calculation, without any awareness that it was extraordinary. And then she had walked to the door and said, Dad, are we getting lunch on the way home, or did we already eat? Because they had already eaten, and she had apparently been running a parallel mental thread on the question of lunch the entire time. Daniel had looked at Jade. Jade had looked at Daniel. There was a moment between them. Not arranged, not professional, just the specific, slightly dazed moment of 2 people who had both been inside the same unusual afternoon and were finding the other person's expression in the aftermath of it. He had said, she is a lot. Jade had said, she is extraordinary. He had said it apologetically. She had said it with the specific, honest warmth of someone who meant it entirely. He had looked at her. She had looked at the plant. She said, if you decide the answer is no, I understand. The proposal was what it was, and it is not what it should be, and I think your daughter explained why better than I could have. He had said, I have not decided yet. She had said, take the time. He had said, she asks everyone questions like that. She has since she was 4. Jade had said, who else has she asked? He had thought about it. He had said, mostly just the people who needed to be asked. Jade had looked at him. He had taken Lily by the hand and walked out. Jade had stood in her office for a while. Then she had moved the plant from the window to a better spot by the wall. Then she had called her sister in Houston. Her sister had answered on the second ring and said, Jade, it is Saturday afternoon. Are you okay? Jade had said, I am fine. I wanted to call and tell you something. Her sister had said, tell me. Jade had said, I do not have a good thing to tell you about specifically. I just wanted to call. There had been a pause. Her sister had said, that is the best call I have gotten from you in 2 years. Jade had looked at the plant in its new spot. She had said, I know. Jade Whitmore had built an empire. She had done it through exceptional intelligence and exceptional sacrifice and the specific, disciplined focus of someone who understood that arriving somewhere significant required everything. She had arrived. And then she had stood in a very organized, very efficient, very quiet office with one sad plant and no photographs, and had been visited by a 7-year-old girl who had asked her, in the direct conversational register she used for all things, whether she was lonely, whether she had anyone to call when something good happened, whether she was scared. 3 questions. One afternoon, the business proposal for the Singapore expansion was still on the table. Daniel Park had not yet given his answer. Jade Whitmore had moved the plant and called her sister and stayed on the phone for 45 minutes talking about nothing important and everything that was. The empire was still there on Monday morning. It would always be there on Monday morning. What Jade was beginning to understand, through the specific, unhurried attention of a child who had not yet learned to look away from the things that needed to be looked at, was that the empire was the branch. She had been building it for 16 years. She had not yet started on the root. Almost 8-year-old Lily Park had knocked on the door, and Jade Whitmore had, for the first time in a very long time, opened it. Final question for you. Have you ever had someone see you, really see you, without agenda, without management, and felt, in the seeing of it, that you had been carrying something you did not know you were carrying? Leave your answer below. Your voice belongs in this conversation. If this story found something warm in you today, share it with someone who needs it. One share. It costs nothing and means everything. I love you all. I will see you in the next story.